people started looking at Barbie as a bad thing. Like, how dare this Barbie wear makeup? How dare she be fashionable? This is, perpetuating the patriarchy. And it's like, Barbie's doing this for her. She's not doing this for anybody else.
BJ Colangelo is a writer and editor at /Film, where she's recently written a piece called The Only Guide to Barbie Lore You Will Ever Need, an extremely comprehensive look at the cultural icon, the cultural movement that is Barbie. She also hosts the podcast This Ends at Prom with her wife Harmony that analyzes movies made for teenage girls. On this episode, BJ will go through the moral panics, conspiracy theories, and misunderstandings that followed this incredibly controversial toy, starting way back in the 1960s and continuing into this very day, instigated by conservatives and feminists alike. BJ's passion for understanding the impact of this patron saint of girlhood, both the positive and the negative, caused me to rethink everything I thought I knew. After making this episode and seeing the movie this weekend, which I absolutely loved, and despite my genderqueer fear of America's pinkest lady, I can now say, officially, that I'm a Barbie boy. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. Hello, BJ. Thank you so much for coming on here. I am so thrilled.
I'm gonna explode and turn into glitter. I'm so excited.
Perfect. We just had, a few weeks ago, your lovely wife, Harmony, on the show to talk about Jackass, so it feels like very fun that you're gonna now talk to us about Barbie, and it's just a great dichotomy.
I mean, she talked about Jackass. I'm talking about Barbie. Same thing, obviously.
Same thing. And I bet we'll find out why. I love it. So, okay. We're gonna just roll with this. Actually, today, BJ's kind of taken the reins because I don't know anything about the Barbie/Ken moral panics, etc. I don't know. Maybe there's a conspiracy theory. We'll find out. But yeah, we're gonna just talk all things Barbie and, through the decades. Is that right?
I mean, we can go through decades. We've got themes. Barbie has been around for over 60 years now, and she has never not been controversial.
Oh, I'm so excited. When I think of the controversy, it's like growing up in the 90s and people were really upset about kind of the unrealistic body standards. And but it sounds like there's plenty more than that. But that's my base understanding. But before we get started, will you kind of tell me your relationship to Barbie growing up and now?
Oh, this makes me feel so warm inside. So I'm a lifelong Barbie girl. I have always loved Barbies, and a big part of that love is because I also grew up poor. And Barbie is one of the most accessible toys on the market because there's also a huge secondhand market for Barbies. A lot of times when, young girls get to a certain age, I mean, there's even songs about it where it's like, I'm getting rid of my Barbies because now I'm into boys. That is very much a thing. So what ends up happening is you either have older sisters or cousins or babysitters or whoever that just sort of will Barbies down through the generations. So even though I had no money as a kid, I had bins full of Barbies. I had secondhand houses that my mom would painstakingly disinfect with rubbing alcohol. A lot of times removing some of the sticker accessories. So some of my Barbie dream houses didn't have wallpaper because she was like, kids are gross, I'm cleaning this out. At one point, I even was lucky enough to have the ride-along Barbie convertible that we got at a garage sale. Again, had to clean because kids are gross. But I've always loved Barbie. And it wasn't until I was probably around 13 or 14 that I started leaving Barbie behind. I donated my Barbies. My mom ran a daycare, so she kept a lot of them for a while, but donated the Barbies to other kids. And I kind of put her in the back of my mind because, like you said, I'm also a 90s kid. So I did grow up where people were saying Barbie's a bad influence. She was in the headlines all the time because there were some controversial Barbies that came out in the 90s. A lot of them, actually. 90s was a weird era for Barbie. But I put her to the side and I didn't really think about her. And then towards like the 2010s, when I kind of got back on the Barbie train, was with the web series The Most Popular Girls in School, which was a comedy web series that had 5 seasons where they used Barbies to do stop motion comedy, like a teen comedy show. But I saw that and I was like, wait, this is really funny. I wonder what else people have been doing with Barbie. And then I discovered things like Barbie Life in the Dream House, which is an animated TV show that is super meta, where they're not trying to treat Barbie as a human. They're treating Barbie as a doll pretending to be a human. So it is a comedy, like animated series that uses like toy logic and is very meta and breaks the fourth wall all the time. It's like there's jokes about like, did you know if you cut your hair, it doesn't grow back? Because that's how Barbies work. Right. And from there, I sort of wanted to fill in the gaps, learn as much as I possibly could about Barbie because she was so influential to my life, whether it was, imaginative play, being able to like work out my own stories by using Barbies as props, or being gay and making out with my size Barbie because that was my first girlfriend. So she was really important to me and I wanted to learn more about her. And in that journey, just finding out how so many things I had been led to think about Barbie as a kid and even as a young adult are just kind of not true. I got to deal with my own personal "you're wrong about" with Barbie. And ever since then, I've been trying to champion her as much as possible. But, I work in the film industry and we just really hate femininity like a lot as a culture. And especially in an industry that's very male dominated. If I express my love of Barbie or my knowledge of Barbie, that can then discredit me in other avenues where it's like, well, I don't trust what she has to say about horror movies because she likes Barbie. So clearly both of those things can't exist at the same time. But luckily with this movie coming out, I now have the opportunity to kind of barf out all of the knowledge I've acquired over the years and it not be weird and is timely.
It's a Barbie vindication moment, it feels like.
It really is, because something that I can't stop thinking about is that, yes, Barbie is a toy, for sure. And this new movie
for sure. She's a toy.
She's a toy. But she's also a cultural icon. And to kind of write her off as just, oh, this is a toy, or this movie is, oh, just one giant commercial for a toy. Mattel does not need help selling Barbies. Like, they're fine. She's also an American institution. She is one of the most recognizable pop culture figures in history. She has more of a cultural saturation than Mickey Mouse. Like, that is just a documented fact. Yeah. There are more Barbies in America than there are humans. She's everywhere. And to kind of discount that legacy is silly to me, especially in a culture where we congratulate men who have kept all their comic books and superhero action figures over the years. We commend men who know everything about Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it's considered like a cool thing to be an expert in that field. But when women are experts in Barbie, we're seen as juvenile or, feeding into the patriarchy or whatever other terrible connotations we like to associate to femmes. And it just proves the misconceptions that exist around Barbie and also a lot of the anti-femme hate that's just sort of embedded in our culture.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know, you bring up I feel like it's like the relationship that you have to Barbie says so much about your relationship to gender and sexuality. I've talked about this in our gender reveal episode a long time ago, gender reveal party episode. And my relationship to Barbie was actually told to me by my dad, after I came out. And he had said that he suspected that I was gay when I was about 3 years old and we went to, the department store toy section. And of course, everyone remembers and still sees the aisle that is completely pink and completely saturated in Barbie. And we were walking into that aisle, and I stopped and I put my hands up like a cartoon and backed out in fear. And, you know, I would get Barbies as gifts, like every person who's perceived as a girl. And I had sort of a terror. You know, I was really afraid of Barbie because I was like, I am really supposed to like this. Like, I'm really supposed to be all about Barbie. And I was not, but I did take all the clothes off of my Barbies and put them on my rubber and plastic reptiles. So I got to really use Barbie to my own advantage. But, you know, so I don't know what that says about my gender. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think, you know, like there's a really formative thing that you experience just in relationship to this, as you said, like this major cultural icon and institution that means so much more than itself. So I think we should get into it. I don't know where you want to start, but let's go.
I mean, we got to start at the absolute beginning. So the Barbie doll was revolutionary because it was the first like mainstream doll that was not a baby. Baby dolls were the most common dolls. Like dolls have existed all throughout history, ranging back to like the ancient Egyptians. Like dolls have always been a part of our culture, but they were a lot of times like ritual effigies, or they were rag dolls, or they were in most cases babies. And that limits play. Like there is a lot of like, there are social emotional benefits to teaching any child how to care for something smaller than them or as a child. Like that is good. But when that's your only option, then that limits your play. You can't really use your imagination with the baby doll because there's a lot of preconceived notions attached to it. Like, oh, this is a baby. How do I play with a baby? Well, I have to take care of it. And then a toy doubles as a training object, which is not great. And that's why so many of like little kids' toys, especially ones that are marketed towards girls, tend to be very domestic. It's like, this is the kitchen playset, or this is the shopping cart playset.
The Easy Bake Oven.
Easy Bake Ovens. Yeah, a lot of it's like very domestic and nurturing. So Barbie was different because she was a fashion doll and she was an adult. And her body looks like an adult. And that is because Ruth Handler, who is the inventor of Barbie, stole the idea. She stole the idea from a German gag gift doll called Build a Lily, who is based on a comic, and she is a sex worker.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So she is a sex worker doll who, she was in comics, like these really like raunchy, like boys comics, like in like adult male magazines, and they made dolls of her, and she was like a gag gift. And what the purpose of giving that doll to men was is up in the air, but I feel like we can all assume what the point was of giving men a sex worker doll.
Yes.
But Ruth Handler saw that in Germany and was like, wait, there's something to this, and basically stole that and turned it into Barbie, to the point that Mattel did have to like buy out the rights for, the likeness and whatnot, because they just straight up stole it. That's why the original Barbie from the 60s is looking off to the side. That's why she's got that like really thick, like one wing eyeliner sort of look to her.
Totally. Yeah.
Because she's a lady of the night.
She's got a bit of a pinup almost vibe, I would say.
Definitely. Especially in the black and white bathing suit.
Yes.
Very, very pinup-y.
Yes. Iconic. And so she's coming out. What is the year that Barbie comes onto the market for American girls?
So she makes her debut at the World's Toy Fair in 1959, and people freaked out because they were like, that doll has boobs. What is this about? And Ruth Handler, very much was trying to explain to people, this is not a baby doll. This is a doll for inspiration. It is a fashion doll. This is a doll where girls could be anything. And they weren't entirely sure if this was going to work. People were very worried about it. There was immediately the moral panic of like, is this appropriate for children? And then she comes on the market in 1961, and she is hugely popular immediately. Some girls actually didn't like her face because they thought it was weird because she's looking looking off to the side. But for the most part, they were really, really excited to have a doll that they could dress up and use in ways that was not a baby. Suddenly, they were able to have like their own little stories. And as things went forward, so Barbie's first job is that she's a teen model, of course, and then she becomes a fashion designer. So her first two jobs are very, very much under the same umbrella. But then she becomes a nurse. And once Barbie becomes a nurse, that is when the trend of Barbie can do anything starts to happen. And they start releasing all of these different jobs, more hairstyles, different like makeup looks, but they're all still looking off to the side. They actually don't change her face mold until the 70s with like Malibu Barbie. And that's when she looks forward for the first time. And that also kind of like changed the game, because then she stopped having this sort of like bedroom eyes appearance. And that made her even more popular with the people who were, you know, maybe a little worried that Barbie was a little bit too sultry for their children.
Well, and yeah, we're like placed right now, like right after the 1950s and into the early 60s, when the domestic family unit was like the most important thing. It was like Americans' God, right? It was so ingrained in our culture to have women act a certain way and not go outside of those parameters. So it makes sense that there would be kind of a moral panic with this doll that has almost its own agency and then proceeds to basically tell girls that there are other options for them and that they can do things that they otherwise are kind of discouraged to do throughout this very buttoned up decade.
Absolutely. And so Ruth Handler has said that her whole philosophy with Barbie is that through the dolls, little girls can be anything, and that Barbie has always represented the fact that a woman has choices. And Barbie is so revolutionary, not only in that girls could now look towards the future, like she's an aspirational tool, but she was also doing things that women in real life were not able to do at the time. The Barbie Dream House comes out before we have the women's mortgage liberation movement in the 70s, which is when banks could no longer legally discriminate against women looking for housing if they were unmarried. So Barbie owned a home on her own before most women could do that.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
She also was an astronaut before Sally Ride was an astronaut. So she really was capturing this idea of what is possible, anything, when our world was not reflecting that. So there are plenty of things that, and we'll get into it, to dislike about Barbie, for sure. But it's very important to remember that history, because the intention has always been, you can do anything, you can be anything, you are not limited by being a domestic mother. But that's not to say that you can't be one. You can be a mother. There are Barbies that have kids. There are little kids that you take care of. There are, you know, Midge was a pregnant Barbie. Barbie's first best friend is Midge. She was a pregnant Barbie. She got taken off the market because she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. And people, of course, had to freak out because that's implying that she got baby out of wedlock. Calm down. Please chill out.
Man, yeah, that is, you're doing some real magnifying glass detective work on that.
Right. It's absolutely, like, no kid is gonna notice that. Only parents did. The one complaint about that doll that I will give, though, is that it is kind of body horror, because the belly would like pop off and there'd be like a little fetus toy inside.
Oh, that is freaky. But I love it.
It is a little terrifying, but it's also, that's accurate. Like, that's what it looks like in your body.
Yeah, it's like it's actually teaching something important. It feels like some semblance of what the anatomy is.
Absolutely. Issa Rae, during the press tour for the Barbie movie that's out, has talked about how Barbie was her introduction to sex ed, where even though these dolls didn't have genitals, she was like positioning them in ways and like figuring out how sex works by using Barbies, and also, you know, seeing what a naked body looks like other than her own, even though, yeah, they don't have genitals, but you can tell what's happening underneath. You're like, oh, the boobs go out. Okay. And learning about your anatomy through Barbie.
Totally. Okay. All right. So now we're like kind of in the 1970s?
Yes. So
okay.
Something that I did kind of skip over that's very, very important is two things. So one, Ken is introduced in 1961. He is introduced as an accessory, and he has always been an accessory. Ken is her on-again, off-again boyfriend, and Ruth Handler specifically like put that in her like her own personal lore of like they will never be married because I never want Barbie to be limited by marriage. So if you ever see like the doll collections where it looks like a bride and groom, that is a fashion shoot. They're modeling. They're not actually married.
Wow.
So I think that's very funny because
Obsessed.
she's like, I never want Barbie to be limited by the roles of wife and mother. Like she can be those things in some instances, like other dolls can, but like Barbie and Ken will never get married. They've actually broken up a few times, but we'll get there.
Okay.
But in 1968, they also introduced the Christie doll, which is the first black Barbie. And she was designed by black doll designers. So her features are different than the white Barbie. And she's a very, very important doll. She's like the biggest, most popular mainstream black doll in the market and is kind of the godmother of a lot of the diversity that we will see with Barbie throughout the years. So very important that that's there because it was extremely validating to a lot of little girls, but also, you know, freaked out a bunch of racists who couldn't believe it.
Of course. Tell me again what year?
68.
68. That's early. I feel like I'm like pretty impressed by Barbie's progressiveness in this instance.
Yeah, they were trailblazers in the mass marketed doll industry in terms of diversity, which I think is something that gets forgotten a lot. You know, they've had their missteps over the years for sure, but they did a lot of groundbreaking work. But as we go into the 70s and, you know, second wave feminism is starting to kick up some steam here, the critique of Barbie gets really loud. Activists really don't like Barbie because two reasons. One, anti-femme hate. On our podcast, The Sunset Prom, we call it the hashtag not like most girls energy, where people started looking at Barbie as a bad thing. Like, how dare this Barbie wear makeup? How dare she be fashionable? This is, you know, perpetuating the patriarchy. And it's like, Barbie's doing this for her. She's not doing this for anybody else.
But isn't that the folly of second wave feminism in a lot of ways?
Exactly. There is an amazing documentary, I think it's on Hulu right now, called Tiny Shoulders Rethinking Barbie. And it's all about the history of Barbie and also like when they introduced the different body size Barbies a couple years ago. And they interview Gloria Steinem in it. And Gloria Steinem fucking hates Barbie. And she's like, I'm so glad that I never grew up with Barbie. And it's like, okay, cool.
Oh, Gloria. Complicated person, you know, good and bad. There's it's no villains, no heroes.
Exactly. Exactly.
More after this. And now, back to the show.
I mean, and similarly, there's a quote that I really like from one of the people they talk to in Tiny Shoulders. Her name is M.G. Lord. She's an author. She wrote the book Forever Barbie, the unauthorized biography of a real doll. And she says, Barbie is too complicated for either an encomium or an indictment. And I love that.
Yeah,
because,
totally.
Yeah, she's complicated. But when second wave feminism was picking up steam and people were starting to have this kind of like Barbie backlash, that's also when we start getting more of the narrative of the unrealistic beauty standard and the looking at the dimensions of Barbie. And yes, Barbie's dimensions could not work on a human being, but there is a practical reason for that.
Ooh, okay.
It is not because Mattel was like, we want to promote girls to have like gigantic necks and no waist. No, it's because Barbie is, above all else, a mannequin. She is a fashion doll, and clothing can be made smaller to fit a doll. It cannot be made thinner. So you're taking clothing with the same fabric thickness that would be on human clothing and trying to put it on something way smaller. And when you do that, it then bulks up. If you keep the doll with like human proportions, any collar, any sort of like top sleeve will just go to her chin because the fabric is so thick. So they had to make the neck a little bit longer. And the reason that her waist is like ungodly small is for that same reason. Once you put it on her frame, because the clothing is so thick, it just billows out on her. So it needs somewhere to go, and that makes her smaller. And unfortunately, a lot of people, it's kind of like the depiction endorsement argument that we have a lot with film, where people saw Barbie and it's like, oh, this is clearly the body that they want. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening here. She's a mannequin. She's a little piece of plastic that is meant to show clothing. And the doll clothes just look a little weird if they're not fitted properly.
Wow. And because that's like the biggest Barbie critique that I've ever, that anybody's ever heard, is the unrealistic beauty standards. And it is definitely explained as if Mattel is promoting this in some almost conspiratorial way. But like you're saying, it just sounds like it's just one big misunderstanding, which, of course, I think is very common in both of our lines of work to spot. And that really changes everything about the story of Barbie.
It does. It just changes all of that. I will say, however, huge asterisk to this.
All right.
Barbie did royally screw up. I guess I'm going back a little bit. This did happen in the 60s. So the seed was planted in the 60s, it exploded in the 70s.
Okay.
2 Barbies were released in the 60s that do not help the Barbie unrealistic beauty standards argument. The first one is Babysitter Barbie in 1963, and she comes with a magazine to read.
Okay.
And the magazine says, like, how to lose weight.
All right. Yeah, well.
And on the inside it says, don't eat.
No.
Yes.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does. There's also Slumber Party Barbie, and she has a little scale, and the scale is locked at 110 pounds. Like, okay.
Yeah, right.
Both of these things are not great, admittedly. But again, we have to look at context. A lot of people, including myself, argue that this is not like Mattel's call to be thin. This is a reflection of the messaging that was already existing in the media. This is a reflection of the magazines that were already on sale, the advice that was already being given to young girls, because Barbie is always a reflection of the cultural time period that she's in. That's why her look in the 80s is big hair. That's why in the 70s it's not. She's reflecting the times. So she was reflecting the times, and it just happens to be an example of this not being a good time.
Absolutely. I'm just like thinking of what Barbie I would want when you're saying Babysitter Barbie. And I'm thinking like the calls coming from inside the house Barbie, who's the babysitter, but there's like a second menacing man Barbie that comes down her stairs after calling and saying creepy things for like 3 hours. That's my kind of Barbie. Uh-huh.
I would love if it had like Carol Kane's big hair too.
Yeah,
as well. It'd be perfect. It's so silly. So the 70s is when all of these like, missteps kind of really get the megaphone, because like, did you know that Barbie did this? And it's like, all right, yeah, we do, but that was a while ago and it was reflecting what was going on. Like, please use context. So something else happens in the 70s, which is that Ruth Handler leaves Mattel, because Ruth Handler, as much as she is a wonderful woman who changed the world by giving us all Barbie, she also really, really liked tax evasion.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's not that surprising.
Yeah, so she left Mattel because she had charges of fraud and false reporting to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. It was a big thing. So Ruth went away for a bit.
It's like feminist of her.
Yeah. So Ruth goes away, and so now there are other people creating Barbies without her input, which includes Growing Up Skipper. So, Growing Up Skipper is Barbie's little sister, was meant to be a puberty doll to educate young girls about their changing bodies. So if you crank her arm, she gets taller, because that's what happens when you go through puberty.
Wow.
And this is 5 years after Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret was published. And I regret to inform you that when you cranked her arm, Skipper must improve her bust, and her boobs do grow.
Wow. Wow. And what year is this coming out?
I think this is like 73, something around there.
Wow. Wow. But also like some sex ed that folks are not getting in school, I'm guessing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The doll was designed by a well-meaning man. I do not have his name, but he's
a well-meaning man.
He's even said, he's like, well, my daughters were going through, puberty at the time. I thought this would be helpful. And I see the logic behind it. And it's like, no, this is actually like kind of wonderful. But also, yeah, parents were horrified by this because they're like, why does this doll's boobs get bigger? So, great intention, just
weird as fuck execution.
So from the 70s throughout the 80s, Barbie really doesn't have as many controversies during that time, with the exception of Ken. So I haven't really talked a whole lot about Ken yet, because Ken's controversies are pretty much the exact same. They just evolve with the time. Everybody thinks Ken is gay and that he is Barbie's beard because, they're never going to marry, because he's feminine, because he is, what would be described as a metrosexual, because he is a doll and not an action figure, because he doesn't have a dick.
And what year, I love years. What year is Ken introduced?
Ken is introduced in 1961, but his controversies never stop. They never go away. But a lot of people don't pay all that much attention to Ken, but when those controversies happen, oh, are they wonderful. So the same way that Barbie's best friend Midge, who was also introduced in the 60s, Ken has a best friend. His name is Alan.
The name Alan is so funny to me. Sorry, it's like the most normal name.
And it's Allan. So Barbie is named after Ruth Handler's daughter, Barbara. Ken is named after her son, Ken, and Alan is named after Barbara's husband, Alan. Alan gets discontinued at one point, and it's because Barbara and Alan got divorced.
Oh my God.
Which is great.
That's amazing. Really sticking it to him.
But when Alan was introduced, also in the 60s, the big selling point was he's Ken's buddy Alan. All his clothes fit him. Which, from a marketing standpoint, it's them being like, hey, you don't have to go out and buy all of this new, clothing for this doll. He has the same body mold as Ken. They can share clothes. But again, the 60s, we weren't calling people boyfriend or husband. It was oh, this is my special friend, my buddy.
Mm-hmm. My roommate.
My roommate, yeah. So Ken's buddy Alan, who can wear all his clothes, definitely had some gay connotations underneath it. There were a lot of people very concerned about the Ken doll crotch, which is really funny because the Venn diagram of people who are concerned about Ken doll crotch and the people who think gay people are groomers just by existing is a circle. So it's maybe pick a lane, maybe.
Yeah,
something.
no kidding.
But throughout the 80s, the only real controversies are just a continuation of why does Ken look so gay all the time? And it's because the 80s were, a decade of excess. So Barbie was excessive. The makeup got brighter. The clothing got brighter. The hair got more ridiculous and more fashionable. So
I'm guessing she starts driving that convertible sometime in there.
Oh, yeah. She starts driving, I believe, in the 70s.
Okay. All right.
She had, a house in the 60s. She had cars. She's had over 200 pets, including zebras. She's had over 200 jobs. She has done everything possible at this point. But the biggest Ken controversy ever is in the early 90s. And it is a man named Earring Magic Ken.
Earring Magic Ken.
Earring Magic Ken, early 90s.
Okay.
He has bleach blonde hair. He is wearing lavender mesh shirt with a lavender leather vest.
Oh my
God. Is wearing a circular metallic ring necklace. He has an earring.
Wow. This Ken is sounding pretty hot, if you ask me.
He's incredible. He, to this day, is the highest selling Ken because gay men bought him like crazy.
I can only imagine.
Because they were like, we see you, Ken, and bought him immediately. Mattel discontinued him because there was such an intense backlash of people being like, that Ken is gay. Look at the earring. He's gay. And they also thought that his necklace was a cock ring.
Wow.
You know, adult sexualizing children's toys.
Who thought that? Just parents were like,
just parents.
Doubles as a cock ring on his cockless body.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Totally normal stuff.
Totally normal stuff.
Totally normal thing to think about, yeah.
So, you know, that kind of, that alone sort of leads into just about every Barbie controversy that's ever happened, which is 9 times out of 10, it's parents freaking out about things their kids are never going to notice or think about ever.
Yeah.
And that goes with the body stuff too. I mean, I'm pulling like a more recent example, but TV writer and comedian Ashley Ray posted this thread very recently about Barbie and like the unrealistic kind of like standards that were set for her. And she was talking about how she doesn't think that these controversies are even real. And she says, I simply did not give Barbie this power over me. I controlled her life. I had men cheating on her. I had her tied to my ceiling fan like it was a roller coaster ride. What could she do to make me feel bad? And the people responding to it were basically like, yeah, I never felt bad about Barbie. Like the girls at school, maybe. My mom having weird hangups about weight and body, maybe, but never Barbie. Like she was a toy. She was my friend. She was, you know, a tool. I never looked at her and thought, I wish I looked like Barbie.
Yeah.
You know, like it's pretty prominently shown that a lot of the studies that come out where it's like Barbie has been proven to be bad for kids are all like very imperfect studies. One of the big ones, I think this was actually done in the 2000s. I know you love dates, and I'm sorry I'm jumping all over the place.
No, please.
But in the 2000s, there was this study that came out where they had kids play with Barbies, and then they had kids play with a doll called Emmy. And Emmy is a doll with realistic human proportions, just kind of shrunk down. Mm-hmm. And they asked kids, like, well, how do you feel about the Barbie? How do you feel about this? And they felt not great about themselves. The ones that played with Barbie and the ones that played with Emmy were fine. And they were like, oh, I love this doll. I've never seen her. She's amazing. And people like to point to that study and be like, see, that's proof Barbie's bad for girls. They like dolls that have, you know, realistic body proportions, which is an imperfect study because Barbie has so much cultural importance and messaging and connotations put upon her that you can't do that study with another doll because you're introducing a new variable. You're introducing a doll that doesn't have any preconceived notions attached to her. So a lot of the messaging that kids could be taking in from parents, the media, news, whatever about Barbie doesn't exist on this doll.
Yeah.
So the only way to have a true, like, unbiased study is to also have a bigger Barbie. And they did that.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So in the Tiny Shoulders documentary, when they are trying out the different body sizes of the new Barbie line, because they now have Curvy Barbie, they let kids play with regular Barbie, and then they had kids play with Curvy Barbie. And when you listen to the audio, all of the kids call that Barbie fat. And they're like, I don't like her, she's fat. Wow. And that is proof positive that the issues kids have about like bodies and whatever is not Barbie specific. It is society telling them that they shouldn't like fat Barbies because they have no problem with Barbie until you show her a little bit bigger, and then they can make comparisons, and they've been taught bigger is worse. Yeah. So that's what they're reflecting. So it's fascinating where it's like, no, this is not, you know, Barbie is bad. This is society's bad. Yeah. Barbie is just being caught in the crosshairs of the culture war.
And it's an easy thing. I mean, it's a moral panic, right? So it's like we have this greater issue of fat shaming and of just this dislike and hatred, really, of different types of bodies. But instead of looking at that, which is very complicated and requires like a lot of self-reflection and a lot of work teaching kids to unlearn these messages, but no, instead we'll just blame a toy, and we can put all of our guilt and all of our questions and all of our pain even into this like totem, right? And we can blame this totem that is now imbued with all of this cultural power and evil, when really we are the ones who need to actually look at ourselves and change the culture.
Totally. Like that is exactly it. It is so much easier for people to kind of push their shortcomings and all of the conversations that they're not ready to have and blame them on Barbie, because then you can just, it's all Barbie's fault. We'll throw her in the garage or put her in the garage sale, and then we never have to talk about it again. And then meanwhile, you're internalizing all of this horrible shit that you're being fed.
Yeah. And you're like, I'll go have a Slim Fast for lunch. And
right. I can only have snack wells. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
That's what I live off of. And so the 90s is when Barbie's moral panics like really start to kick up again, because we're starting to get closer to entering like the 24-hour news cycle, and that becomes a thing. So you got to fill airtime where you can, and oftentimes that means like, here's a weird local news station story that's then going to get picked up and taken everywhere.
And we've got like the third wave feminism happening at the same time. So there's going to be a lot more questioning of these totems that represent femininity.
Absolutely. So also in the early 90s, we get something called Teen Talk Barbie. And she is a Barbie that when you like push a button on her, she has like a bunch of different recorded phrases. And she has two controversies surrounding her. So the first one is another instance of Mattel having great intentions and people losing their minds about it. So Barbie's phrases on this doll had everything between like the very kind of stereotypical like shopping is fun, like okay, but then nicer ones like, hey, what kind of dreams do you have? Like really nice things. But then they also had one that said math class is tough. And
I mean, it is.
It is. And the intention was to validate that for young girls to be like, yeah, we get it. Math class is tough. However, that very quickly turned into Barbie is promoting the idea that women have no place in STEM. And it's like, that's literally not what's happening. You took a long reach for that.
Yeah, no kidding.
But this controversy to me is very much, again, to you're wrong about it. Like this is like the coffee lawsuit thing where everybody talks about math class is tough or math is hard. Like people know this controversy, but they don't know that that was not the only thing she said, or that was one of, only a handful of negative things she said. And that this point of this doll was that she would feel like a friend who would have real conversations with you. That all gets lost, of course.
Well, and also like this is now making me think of the very iconic Simpsons episode where Lisa is really angry and goes to the house of the person who makes Malibu Stacy because Malibu Stacy's saying a bunch of dumb things that make Lisa feel that, it's telling girls to be dumb. And, I mean, Lisa was very third wave.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up because, that episode is inspired by this controversy. And the second controversy that happens is that there was an organization called the Barbie's Liberation Organization, BLO.
The Barbie Liberation Front, yeah.
They were a third wave feminist like activism group. And what I will give them credit for is that they were not wholly anti-Barbie. They also had issues with G.I. Joe promoting like toxic masculinity. So like they at least were thorough.
Very good.
But they started stealing Barbies and G.I. Joes that could talk off the shelves and switching their voice boxes.
I mean, that is cool.
You would push a G.I. Joe and it would be like, let's go to the beach. And then you would press Barbie and it would be like, vengeance is mine.
Wow. That's cool.
Which is kind of amazing.
I love it. I do like some very creative guerrilla activism. I gotta respect.
Too.
Yep.
And like the whole point was to be like, see how silly gender roles are because they are. Yeah. They're really silly for sure. But like I do love that. I love the idea of it's funny to me to see like Barbie with like vengeance is mine, but I think I'm so used to seeing like feminine things subverted, I usually don't see it in the opposite direction. I would love to have a G.I. Joe that says, like, I love shopping, don't you? Like,
they got to be out there somewhere in somebody's, like, display case, I think.
Oh, God, it'd be so funny. So another thing that controversial thing that starts happening in the 2000s, or into the late 90s into the 2000s, these genres kind of like blend together because it's also people discovering issues they have with Barbies once they get them secondhand. So a lot of the controversies cover a long period of time. It's sort of like, you know, when something will go viral every like 6 months and it's like, oh, now we have to have this conversation again. Yeah. It's like the precursor to that. So this is an instance where Mattel actually genuinely was like, no, this is on you. You messed up this time. They started doing brand partnerships. They've always done them throughout history, but they really got into it in the 90s because Barbie was having a big resurgence. So they did an Oreo Barbie, like Oreo fun Barbie, and she had like little Oreo clothes and like cookies, and it was very cute. But Mattel did not think of the optics of how blonde Oreo Barbie has a completely different look and social connotation than a black Oreo Barbie. So like you done goofed there, Mattel.
Sure, yeah. Not fully thought through, right?
No, not very good. So that's definitely an issue. There's another Ken controversy, another, of course, gay Ken controversy, which is Sugar Daddy Ken, who looks very wealthy and a little bit older.
And his name is Sugar Daddy Ken.
His name is Sugar Daddy Ken, and Mattel tried to pull a fast one to be like, well, it's because his West Highland White Terrier is named Sugar, and he's Sugar's daddy. And it's like, Mattel, please chill out. We know what you're doing here.
Is this in the 90s?
I think it's early 2000s.
So the term Sugar Daddy is very much out there.
Yeah, it's
okay. All right.
It's not a not known thing, but it is really funny for me to think about.
Yet again, gay men are like, you're signaling to me. You're signaling to me.
Exactly. And I mean, going back to The Simpsons, like that's why Smithers is revealed to be a huge collector of Malibu Stacy, because Mattel is very aware of their gay audience, which I think is lovely. And there's a lot of queer stuff that sneaks in like Barbie movies, because we do have animated movies start happening in the 90s, like made for TV movies. And then they really go wild in the 2000s. There's like 40 of them at this point. And Barbie and the Diamond Castles is like just very, very sapphic without, you know, it's very subtextual, but like if you watch it and you're a queer person, you'll be like, okay. So there's that.
I hear you. Yeah.
But another thing that happens in the 2000s that is a big deal is that Barbie breaks up with Ken on Valentine's Day in 2004.
And how was that known? How did we find out about that breakup?
Oh, Mattel put out a press release. Like
it was big release?
It was big news.
Wow. Love it.
To be fair, Barbie was running for president that year. She was a busy lady. She did not have time for a relationship. Because yes, Barbie has, like, we do get a new presidential Barbie within the election cycles. So she was running for president in 2004.
Did she win?
I don't know if they've ever like established her as like election winning Barbie, but there is like president Barbie and there is like president like campaign Barbies.
Got it. She tried to overturn the election Barbie. Yeah.
Yeah, we've never got getting sued by Dominion Barbie
or lock her up Barbie. Yeah.
But I will say one of the Barbie that is running for president, it might be the 2004 one actually. She is so clearly modeled after like 90s or late 90s, early 2000s Hillary Clinton. Like it's just not even fair. Like just what she looks like.
Are we going like monochromatic pantsuit?
Yeah, monochromatic pantsuit, like when she still sort of had like the bob hair. It's that look. So yeah, a few years after the breakup, Ken receives a makeover from celebrity stylist Philip Block as an attempt to win her back. Ken took out billboards in major cities, basically being like, "Baby, come back."
No way. And it's like a picture of Ken with like "Baby, come back."
Yes, it's like a It's like a Ken doll with like a children's like Valentine's Day heart, like the ones you would get in class. It's like very much that, but he put out billboards asking for Barbie to take him back, and she didn't until 2011.
Wow. Okay, all
so
right.
that does mean that when you see Toy Story 3 and Barbie and Ken are fighting, it's because they canonically were not together. Mattel would not let them be like back together because that would break their internal story.
Wow, consistent.
Yeah.
I appreciate the dedication to the narrative.
Yeah, were very, very intense about making sure that like Barbie follows all of her rules, which is why, before pandemic hit, Greta Gerwig talked about having to go to what she calls Barbie boot camp with Mattel, which is where they basically explain, here are the rules that exist in Barbie that cannot be broken, which includes like Barbie and Ken are on again, off again. Like they will not get married. So like, your movie cannot end with like them walking off into the sunset together because that is not their story. That I think is really wonderful. And I love how intense like Ruth Handler's been about that. She's no longer with us. Ruth passed away. I don't remember the years not in front of me, but she passed away. But like Mattel has kept her like rules throughout, which I think is really nice. It's kind of like how even though Stan Lee is not here anymore, like Marvel will continue to follow like the specific rules that are set for certain characters. Barbie's the same way.
Wow. And I mean, even in Toy Story, like we get a lot of like Ken is gay innuendo, which at this point feels intentional in some ways. Like you said, it's like you cannot make Ken without the knowledge that you are making something that will be read as gay.
Yes, they know. And I'm going to get to a series soon and we'll talk about that.
Okay, great.
And again, I know I'm jumping around all over the place.
But
it's
great.
There's just so many things to keep track of. So another thing that happened in the late 90s into the early 2000s that we need to talk about. I mean, I'll touch on like Barbie had comics in the 90s as well. She does have Marvel comics. Barbie could technically be in the MCU, but that's just not going to happen. But a huge, huge thing that Barbie did in the 90s is enter the world of gaming. There are 70 different Barbie video games, computer games. A lot of them have to do with like tie-ins to some of the animated movies she's done, but some of them are just genuinely really interesting. My personal favorite is Detective Barbie and the Mystery of the Carnival Caper, where she has to save Ken, who's been kidnapped, and go through like this creepy carnival to do it, and she's a detective.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
I played it so much that I am pretty sure that I killed my parents' desktop, like, because I could not.
You just burned it out.
Addicted
wow.
to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's as close to urban legend Barbie as I feel like I'm going to get.
Yeah, and there are so many Barbie games, but two things that are like very, very important is that Barbie fashion designer was the first like Barbie game. It is also the first mass market, quote unquote, like game for girls. So obviously girls have played video games since video games were around, always. But video games like seldom marketed towards girls. Like it was very much like, we don't care about that demographic at all. They will buy it if they want it, but like our focus is boys. Video games have always like historically been marketed towards boys. And Barbie fashion designer was unapologetically a game for girls and is like vital in showing girls that like you have a place in this industry as well. There's an amazing piece at Polygon written by Nicole Carpenter that is an oral history of this game and how it changed the gaming industry that I highly recommend people check out. It's very, very cool because the Barbie video games, like some of them were teaching girls, how to create, a lot of them are puzzle games. But some of them are like Barbie and the Three Musketeers is a Metroidvania style game, which is like you can fight bad guys in it. So like, it's like a fighting game.
Whoa, that's cool.
So there's a publication called Broads at Yale, which is kind of like their feminist journal, I guess, where they were talking about how like, yeah, the Barbie games are like very pink, very girly, because that is just kind of Barbie branding. But they say that the Barbie games, though, also allowed girls to enjoy stereotypically feminine pastimes in a way that also encourages creativity, because now you're mixing like high femininity with tech, which really hadn't been done at that point. And the success of these sorts of games also usher in like a revolution for other toys. This is where we start getting things like Password Journal, which was just unapologetically feminine. This is a girl's toy.
Yeah.
But it is also like password protected using technology, or like you have to use your thumbprint scanner or whatever to open this little pink safe.
Which also says to me, like, we appreciate and see that you have a complex inner life and you like have, you know, like things that you want to keep secret, but that's also like we can honor that by giving you a tool.
Yes, 100%. Like it really, really is that. And again, like these are all the things that get forgotten about and, you know, pushed to the wayside because we just want to be really mean to like a pretty doll.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this in Fangirls, and actually, you know, we ended up talking about that on the show, just how much we hate girls' toys and how much we hate what young girls like, even though they are truly, absolutely the taste makers of American culture in terms of music, fashion, toys. You know, if a swarm of young girls likes it, in 20 years, it's going to be something important.
Absolutely. And that's why Barbie has also like never gone away. And like you look at the longevity of like boy toys, and you know, G.I. Joe is one of the oldest like boy toys that is still in the market, but he does not have nearly the cultural footprint as Barbie. Like Barbie just doesn't go away because she does everything. She's limitless. So everybody, like there is a Barbie for everyone, which I think is really wonderful. Like there are some Barbies that I look at and I'm like, that Barbie's a lesbian. Like I love her, but it's like, you have plaid and boots.
Yes.
Like this Barbie is not straight. So Barbie's popularity, you know, in the 90s and 2000s are also just humongous because this is when we're getting more entertainment crossovers as well, which people were a little like, about. One of them is when Barbie joins the VHS workout tape craze, also in the 90s. It is a terrifying CGI Barbie. Most of the tape is like just actual dance aerobics, and it's very like, I did it all the time as a kid. It's very affirming. It's very much just like, we're here to get our bodies moving and have fun and dance. Like it doesn't ever say like, do this to get the fat off your ass, girls. Yeah, right. Like that doesn't exist. It's still very affirming and lovely, and also features a very, very young Jennifer Love Hewitt in one of her first jobs.
Wow.
She's one of the dancers in the VHS workout video with Barbie.
And one of our scream queens, I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
Very cool.
And then 2001 is when we start getting the direct-to-video Barbie movies, and so that is now there's so many crossovers. You know, there's Barbie and the Nutcracker, so of course you got to have, you know, Nutcracker Barbie. There's Mermaid Tales, so now you have to have Mermaid Barbies. It becomes kind of this like little multiverse world for kids, which I really, really like a lot. There are over 40 of them. Not all of them are good, but parents were very weird about the Barbie movies because they didn't like how they were becoming self-aware.
Interesting. Okay.
And that really comes to a head with the series Barbie Life in the Dream House. So you can watch this on Netflix now if you feel like it, but it is shot in a way that borrows from like the real world. Like they do have like little confessionals where they talk to the camera, but it is a world where it is self-aware. It breaks the fourth wall. They, you know, operate under kid logic. I think it is super funny. I know kids think it's super funny. Some parents really had issues with how self-aware it was, and also felt like it was going to be encouraging kids to watch like reality TV show like The Real World because of the confessional.
They're already watching it. Yeah.
Right. And it's like they already are. So there's no real reason to like freak out about this.
And again, it's reflecting culture. It's like speaking the language of its time.
Exactly.
Not like creating something.
Exactly. And so this is where the pivot happens, where in the before times, a lot of these Barbie controversies were moral panics rooted in like second wave feminism or quote unquote like more progressive ideals. now is where the conservatives really start losing their minds. Like, they already lost their minds with like Pregnant Midge and even the introduction of Christy as a black doll and Ken being, you know, possibly gay. Like, they had issues with that. But moving from like here on out, like 99% of the issues that people have are from conservative weirdos.
Yeah,
like
yes.
who just can't handle it. So Barbie Life in the Dream House is, you know, very meta. It is very self-aware. It shows that Ken has always been the king of being down bad for Barbie. In one of my favorite episodes, Barbie's talking about how like her water slide in the dream house isn't working. So Ken takes it upon himself to fix it, even though she was like, you really don't have to do that. And he's like, nope, I have to. I'm going to. And then he gives himself sun poisoning and tetanus. He just can't let anyone else help him because he has to impress Barbie because like it's just in his nature. So then he does that to himself. There's also another episode where he's waiting outside for Barbie to like surprise her for something, but she never opens the door and he waits there for like 3 days.
Wow.
And parents really, really hated that because, you know, this is the inverse of like girl at home waiting by the phone for him to call. Like, this is a guy who is just like, I will do literally anything to make this woman happy. And people are like, Barbie mistreats him. And it's like, Barbie doesn't ask for any of this. She's like, hi, Ken, how are you doing today? Oh, you want to help? Yeah, that sounds great. And then he like takes it upon himself to like extreme home makeover her whole life every time. And it's like, she didn't ask for that, man. Like, you didn't have to do that. He just does
Toxic.
things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So absurd and ridiculous. But I love him very much, and that's fine.
More after this. And now, back to the show. You mentioned that you have more like a conspiracy theory for us since we've done some moral panics. Tell me.
Oh, yes. Okay. So this conspiracy Barbie ended up also being pulled from the shelves because said conspiracy then turned into a moral panic, and the conspiracy was started by the FBI. So I know you've talked about this before, but remember how the FBI was like, Furbies can't come to the Pentagon?
That was the CSA, but yes.
Or the CSA, yes.
Uh-huh.
So this is like the companion piece to that, where there was a Barbie called Video Girl Barbie.
Okay.
And she had a little camera in a necklace and a TV in her back. And the idea was that you could use her to make little videos, essentially turn Barbie into a camera. And she also had like a little USB so you could plug it into your laptop and like watch the videos you made with Barbie. Like, very, very cute. You know, this is part of that boom that we got of like tech meant for girls, or marketed towards girls, I should say. Well, the problem is that the FBI put out a warning where they were like, having a camera in a toy meant for children means that pedophiles are going to abuse your children and record it and make CSM with your children and use Barbie, because Barbie doesn't look like a camera. It looks like a Barbie. They're going to do this or whatever.
Yes.
And they said this with 0 documented instances of this happening. It was just a, well, this could happen.
Yes.
And Mattel had to put out all of these statements where they're like, look, we made this doll specifically because we wanted to get young girls interested in, you know, movie making and recording. There are no documented instances of this happening, but we know that that's not how parents are going to respond. Parents are going to go, the FBI said the magic P word, therefore my children are going to get kidnapped and sold and freaked out.
Okay. All right. That does sound like Talking Angela. If you know anything about Talking Angela, we did an episode about how, you know, she was filming kids. And if you looked into her eye, she was also kind of an AI chatbot. You could see the reflection of a person who was watching your children, which does not make any sense whatsoever in terms of animation. But nonetheless, it seems it's familiar to me for sure, and not surprising.
Yeah, so she, you know, she got pulled off the market. Some people do still sell her on, like, resale shops. And what's also funny is that the clarity of the images is also kind of like when people would take pictures using, like, the Game Boy Color and then print it. Like, you can't see anything. Like, it all kind of looks like shit. But all it took was the FBI putting out a maybe hypothetical for people to just lose their mind, and they just started a conspiracy about this.
The FBI. If the FBI is saying it, it's like you're gonna listen probably if you're a parent.
Exactly.
One of the most, unfortunately trusted institutions in American life.
And it feels to me like when we have any of these conspiracy things where, like the panic around like rainbow parties, where it's like no one actually knew what that was, but then you put it on the news, so
put it
now
on
people
Oprah.
are actually doing it. Right. So that's kind of what it feels like with Video Girl Barbie. Is like, I don't think that was like ever really a thing that people were worried about, but then once you bring the hypothetical into the situation, people just lose it.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. We're just waiting for it. Give me something to panic about.
So Barbie also has a vlog. She started that in 2015. And the Barbie vlog is, in my opinion, the best thing that has happened in like the last 20 years for Barbie. And it has also brought her so much controversy from conservative weirdos.
Okay.
So how they make the Barbie vlog is they shoot it like an actual vlog. Like a person is there, but that person is mocapped, and then they digitize it after. So she moves very authentically like you're watching like a VTuber or something, which I really, really, really like. All of the topics they talk about, they also run them by actual teenagers to be like, is this a thing that you're talking about? Is this something that you would want to hear more about? Like, what is important to you? So some of the videos are, traditional vlogger stuff. It's like me and Ken are gonna do a taste test video or whatever. Like they do little things like that, or this is like a cooking tutorial, like very basic stuff. But the Barbie vlogs get very, very deep. The one that really got me on the Barbie vlogs is the I'm sorry reflex. And the entire video is Barbie explaining to young girls about how society conditions us to say I'm sorry for things that we should not be apologizing for.
Yes.
Like someone bumps into us on the subway and we go, ooh, sorry. Or somebody brings us the wrong meal at dinner and we go, oh, I'm so sorry. This isn't what I ordered. And it's like, why do we do that?
Yeah, I do that constantly.
So do I.
I cannot get out of it.
And so there's something really affirming about having Barbie, who is this person who's been kind of a presence in so many lives, be like, hey, you don't have to say you're sorry for this. Like, it's not your fault, which is like, that was like revolutionary for me. I saw this in like my 20s and I'm like, oh my God.
Because that is a much larger message for much more serious topics as well. Like by saying you don't have to say you're sorry when something's not your fault. Like you don't have to say you're sorry. You're not owed, or you don't owe things to people, and you don't like have to kowtow to what people want you to do or what people think you should be guilty for.
Exactly. She's also really political on these vlogs.
Wow.
After the death of George Floyd in 2020, Barbie invited her friend Nikki, who is a character within the canonical Barbie universe, who is a black doll, to talk about racism.
Whoa.
And so Barbie is basically like sitting there like, I'm going to let my friend talk because this affects her more than it does me. And it's a black Barbie doll being like, here's how I experience racism every day. And it is so good. I cannot explain how good this writing is. When the video came out, Mashable declared Barbie as the only good YouTuber. And then writer and activist Amani Barbarian, if you are cued into like disability TikTok at all, you know who Amani is, at Crutches and Spice. But Amani put out a viral tweet that with that video that says, why is Barbie facilitating better DEI trainings than many organizations?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's good. And Barbie has done this a lot. She had a Barbie come on, her name is Renee, to talk about anti-Asian hate.
Wow.
They did a big thing celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And then one of my personal favorites is that in 2022, for Father's Day, they had two black dolls. They're like the kid-sized dolls. Wish their dads, their interracial gay dads, happy Father's Day on the Barbie vlogs.
Wow. And did people freak out?
People freaked out, Chelsey. They could not, the Barbie's gone woke, blah, 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 like all of that nonsense started happening like wildfire with the Barbie vlogs. And what's so funny is yesterday, Matt Gaetz, Stain of the Goddamn Earth, and his wife, Ginger were going viral because they went to like some party and then it also kind of looked like they were on the pink carpet for the premiere, but like people are not sure if they were actually at the premiere or if they went to this Barbie theme party and then tried to pretend that they were at the premiere. Like nobody knows. But Ginger Gates like posted this unhinged Instagram thing about the new Barbie movie and was like, I can't believe that they've abandoned all their Christian values, that they've done all these things. And it's like, you clearly have not been paying attention then, because Barbie's been talking about racism and gay people for a long time. Where have you been?
Yeah. Absolutely. And may I just say, I believe wholeheartedly they were not at that premiere.
I don't think they were either.
Because we would have seen pictures of people being like, fucking Matt Gaetz and his wife Ginger are on the pink carpet. I think we would have like greater evidence of
exactly
that.
Like the only thing that we saw is like the picture that they posted, and then there was like a Yahoo article that was like they were at some weird Barbie themed rich white people benefit. Like I don't know. So ridiculous. So another like controversy that's not a controversy, but I think is important to mention, is that two of Barbie's I guess like public figures who have been greatly inspired by Barbie are also constantly caught in the culture wars. The first one being Nicki Minaj. Okay. Barbie is the most referenced like pop culture figure in music history. Period.
Wow. Okay.
There are over 8,801 songs that name check Barbie.
Whoa, that's so crazy. Okay.
1,279 songs that name check Barbies. So we're looking at over 10,000 songs that in some way, shape, or form reference Barbie, which is a huge deal. I think second underneath that is Superman, actually. And he's at like 7,000 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. The big four is Barbie, Superman, Batman, and Mickey Mouse. Like those are the big ones.
Okay.
But Nicki Minaj, one of her rap alter egos is Nicki the Harajuku Barbie. And there has been so much academic writing about Nicki's embracing of Barbie and like the unquestionably feminine in the sphere of hip hop and rap, which tends to lean like really masculine, even for the women that are involved. You know, people like will think about like Missy Elliott. You know, she used to wear like Adidas tracksuits all the time. Like Missy has definitely been like very glamorous and feminine. I don't want to like take that from her. But when people think about her, they tend to think of like her cool like suits and like big pants kind of things. And when you think of like people like Lil' Kim, who also have embraced Barbie, there's also aspects of it that feel like a little bit more sexual and a little bit more dangerous. But Nicki was straight up like, nope, it's Barbie. Like that's who I'm inspired by is Barbie, which then adds kind of this like playfulness to her femininity that like broke people's brains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I love, which is why I think there's like something really poetic about her getting to be on the Barbie soundtrack with Barbie World with her and Ice Spice, because it does feel like almost like a thank you to like, hey, thank you for like being so inspired by Barbie, which I think is lovely. But yeah, there's like academic articles about just Nicki Minaj's existence with that persona, which I find very funny because we do the same thing to actual Barbie about her place in the world. And then the other one is Trixie Mattel, skinny legend Trixie Mattel, one of the most recognizable drag queens in our current era. Obviously, her name is taken from Mattel, the company. Trixie's also a doll collector. A lot of her designs and outfits, she has been known to just like send a Barbie doll picture to her designers and be like, this is what I want. Awesome. Like most people are like, here's my inspiration from like this thing I saw in Fashion Week or this thing I saw whatever, and Trixie's like, doll, here you go.
Yep.
Which I love so very much.
Absolutely, I love that.
But you know, having a black rapper and a drag queen both being very prominent fans of Barbie again makes conservatives just melt down and you know start sharing those weirdo posts that like everybody's creepy aunt shares on Facebook.
Right.
So those ones are very, very big. And then the other, like, I guess, big controversy that Barbie has had in recent years is the increase in diversity of the actual doll line. So they introduced the curvy Barbie, who is a little bit thicker. She does not have a thigh gap. She's a little bit shorter as well. They've started adding so many more Barbies with physical disabilities or visual differences. You can get bald Barbie, Barbie with vitiligo, Barbie with a hearing aid. They made the dream house ADA accessible, and now Barbies in wheelchairs can actually get into the dream house because they are compliant at this point.
That's so cool.
Laverne Cox got a Barbie in 2022, so now they have a transgender doll. And just this year, they partnered with the National Down Syndrome Society. They finally produced the first Barbie with Down syndrome, and her face, is different so that it does authentically look like a Barbie with Down syndrome.
Wow, man.
At this point, Barbie comes in 35 skin tones, 97 hairstyles, and that includes different hair textures, 9 different body types, and they're adding more all the time.
Wow.
And people love it or they cannot stand it. Like there is like really no in between.
How dare they put a wheelchair ramp on my Barbie dream house?
Right. It's like so absurd to like watch how the culture response to Barbie has shifted so dramatically, because the first people to be critical of Barbie were like the progressive thinkers, the more liberal minded people. And then the people now who are the most critical of her are the ones that are the most conservative, because
right.
Barbie has evolved over time, and therefore like her place in our culture has evolved over time. But yeah, when it comes down to it, like all of her big controversies, it's either moral panics and people just needing to unpack some shit, or it was really well intended and just not thought all the way through. Like those are really it. Like there's really not been a moment that has been like, oh, this was intentionally harmful and y'all screwed up. They have always been really trying to put their best pointed foot forward. And that, again, it gets lost in this conversation because, like you said, we just want to villainize her because it's so much easier to do that than to unpack the fact that Barbie is also a reflection of the systemic ways our society fails us.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, she's a symbol for what already exists. And so we're going to kind of hate the thing that shows us the truth.
Yeah, how dare Barbie point out how screwed up our society is by letting her have a dream house when real women at the time couldn't get a mortgage on their own? Like, how dare she?
How dare she? And that may be the moral of this story.
Something that I really think is also been really telling with this whole, Barbie resurgence, thanks to the movie, is how many people have been reflecting on their own relationships, not just with Barbie, but also with their own gender and also their feelings about womanhood in general because of it. And no spoilers for the movie. The movie does really tap into a lot of those themes, because I think if you are socialized as a woman in this world, you are told that at a certain point you are not allowed to love these things anymore. And to some extent, if you do love these things, you should feel bad about it, because it's juvenile or it's too feminine or it's girly or what have you. And it has been really powerful and very affirming for me to unpack my relationship with Barbie in the face of all of this, and thinking about how, I always felt weird about loving Barbie. I felt like there was something weird and wrong about me for loving Barbie, especially as a queer person, because it feels like she feels so straight in a lot of ways, but she's not. She's really everything, and she really is limitless. And, if you pay attention the right way, you can recognize, like, I can take the parts of Barbie that work for me. I don't have to take all of it, because that's the same thing we do with any media we consume, where we watch a movie and, one character might really speak to us, but the movie doesn't, or one aspect of the story really hits home our lived experience, but the rest of it doesn't. And we can do the same thing with Barbie. And I think that it's really hard for a lot of people to do that because she comes with so much baggage culturally and historically. But I think that there's something really healing about being able to love and embrace my history with Barbie, and to not be afraid of it and to not be ashamed of it. And also recognize that anytime I did feel bad, or if people made me feel bad about it, it wasn't Barbie's fault. It was the world's fault. Like, I feel really bad for anybody who, was brought up as a girl that didn't like Barbie and was just given Barbies as gifts every year. But like, that's not Barbie's fault. That's the fault of the adults in your life not actually knowing you as a child and just making weird assumptions about you.
I don't blame Barbie. I don't.
Yeah.
I do not blame Barbie.
It's a very common experience, though. I know a lot of people, especially a lot of like queer people who grew up, they were like, this made me feel so uncomfortable. And it's like, well, yeah, you're getting like a very gendered sort of thing like put upon you. Like, that's going to be a not great feeling for anybody. But being able to really like focus on like who the real enemy is in all of this has also, reminded me to do that in my real life with other aspects of feminism and gender theory, is to look beyond the surface. I think that benefits everybody.
And Barbie contains multitudes, and you got to take the good, leave the bad. It's like I took Barbie's clothes off and put it on a reptile.
Exactly.
I left the doll behind and never looked back. But I have mad respect for Barbie after this episode. I had no idea. I am absolutely feeling like Barbie is a true icon right now. And I just so appreciate you coming on and educating me and everybody else. And I hope people have a new perspective on this like very important institution.
I hope so too. Thank you for letting me just like geek out about this. This past week, I have felt like I've just been able to unlock like 20 years of information and feelings that I never felt like I was safe enough to explore. And being able to do that has been so freeing.
Oh, you had an article come out July 19th.
Mm-hmm. It is called The Only Guide to the Barbie Lore You'll Ever Need. It is over 9,000 words. I talk a bit about some of the stuff that we talked about today, but I also expand upon, doll history. I talked to some doll historians, a fashion designer who has a line inspired by Barbie. I also talked to 2 podcasters from the Cult Popture podcast out in Australia, where they watched all 40 plus animated Barbie films and recorded like a 20-something hour podcast about it.
Awesome.
It's amazing. And if you want, it's got the quotes from them. So 2, cisgender dudes being like, yeah, I wasn't sure what I was in for and walked away from it having a better understanding of like how to assess film when you just drown yourself in hours and hours of film that was not made with them in mind. And now they know what a lot of us go through.
Wow, I love it. Okay. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show, and I'll see you soon.
Bye.
This was American Hysteria. Make sure you check out BJ's article, The Only Guide to Barbie Lore You Will Ever Need, at /film.com, as well as her podcast, This Ends at Prom, one of my favorites. If you want to get more of our show, you can head to patreon.com/American Hysteria, where you'll get access to Hysteria Home Companion, a talk show that producer Miranda and I make about all the stories from the cutting room floor, and sometimes some standalone episodes as well, including our newest episodes about the urban legend of the vanishing hitchhiker and the urban legend of an arcade video game said to be controlled by the Men in Black. You can find that at patreon.com/American Hysteria. Also, if you have a great urban legend you remember from growing up, you can leave a message on our Urban Legends hotline at AmericanHysteria.com, and we might investigate your tale and make an entire episode about it. You can find us on social media at American Hysteria Podcast on Instagram and at AmerHysteria on Twitter. And I don't even know how to tell you to find us on Threads, but you can. Just go to our Instagram. This episode has sound design by Clear Como Studios and was produced and edited by Miranda Zickler. And I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Thanks as always for listening, and I hope you have a very Barbie week.